Loki in Smite should not be getting a rework, but a small adjustment or a buff instead. And here's why. Loki in Smite is seen as this rogue-like character who disappears and attacks from behind, ending the unfortunate god who he stumbles on. Ever since his release on November 2nd, 2012, Loki was and still considered one of the most frustrating and unfun gods to fight against. Why is he so unfun to fight against? Well, it's mainly from three general points: his damage, his vanish, and his split push. Loki is a character who can make you disappear in 2 seconds, and even shorter by a veteran or efficient Loki player. Anyone who is not armed with every breastplate that is offered in the store will be part of Loki's hit list. Now, if I was a squishy god who just got killed out of nowhere with little reaction time to respond against such a situation, I could definitely see where people are coming from when people complain about Loki's damage. But actually, it's not about his damage, it's about how easy it is applied, and how secure it is. This leads to another point: his vanish. Loki may at any time become invisible for 4 seconds. During this time, he may simply walk up to a victim and apply his insane amount of burst damage to that target, killing the enemy almost instantaneously without enough time to retaliate. This is the source of people's hatred towards Loki, but even this isn't totally exact. Recently, I've done a survey on my channel and on Reddit that, to my surprise, found interesting results. According to over 1,000 respondents, the majority of people find Loki's split pushing to be the highest frustration factor, not his damage. I can understand too why this is the case. Let's say your team is grouped up and ready to do a typical late game fight that may result in getting more objectives. In normal circumstances, it will be 5 versus 5, but with a Loki on the enemy team, it will typically be a 5 versus 4. And here is what bothers most people. The enemy team that has Loki do not wish to fully commit into a team fight. The enemy who prefers to stand there and watch and maybe harass the enemy, but never fully engage. All while you hear, "Your tower is under attack." You decide to ignore this, and then you hear a few seconds later, "Your Phoenix is under attack." Teleport will not work on the Phoenix, so one of you will have to try to go back to base. But the enemy will try to prevent you from doing so, causing small but significant disarray. And once the enemy stops your back, you decide to fight. But then the enemy retreats, creating this frustrating recycle to occur until you all had it and make a full retreat. But of course that doesn't matter, since your Phoenix is probably dead by now, and the enemy team scores a victory through no fighting. So these are the 3 general points to why Loki is especially unfun to fight against and to fight with. Loki forces the team to adjust themselves, which essentially breaks the basic formation of Loki if Loki is played in the solo lane. Now I'm here to state the reasons why Loki shouldn't be getting a rework and why you shouldn't vote for it either. One of the points I made was his stealth and how there is no specific way of countering it. For the past year, there have been 2 gods and 1 item that can help deal with enemy Loki. The first god is Umoja, whose ultimate may reveal Loki, and of course provide shield and healing to nearby Lokis, and of course stun locking Loki, preventing him from applying his damage. Remember, Loki cannot 100 to 0 you if he cannot apply his damage through his auto attacks. Loki is a hybrid attacker, which means he is both an auto attacker and an ability-based character, but to apply his ability damage, he has to hit you with his auto attacks. Controlling Loki means no problem. The second god that was added recently was Heimdall. With proper communications, Heimdall and his teammates will mostly know where Loki is. Lastly, with Erendite added to the game, any assassin or warrior may easily pick this item up and reveal Loki. With a 120 unit radius that lasts for 10 seconds, Loki will almost always be affected by this item and can make Loki less threatening. The gods who can directly reveal Loki to themselves and their teammates are Umoja, Arachne, Nuwa, Raijin, and Amazinkov. Those who can reveal Loki to themselves only are Camazotz, Heimdall, Hu Yi, Jormungandr, and Chernobog. There are also indirect counters, such as Osiris' Tether, that show the link, and Ares' Chains. There are also other gods who can counter Loki indirectly, but those are some honorable mentions. To sum up, Loki's damage is easily counterable since he cannot damage you if he cannot attack you. His stealth can be countered too with items like Mystical Mail and Erendite, and of course, certain gods that I've mentioned. This leads to only his only frustration factor, split pushing. While I do admit that there is no direct ways of preventing Loki or anyone from split pushing, there have been changes in the past that made it harder for anyone to split push. Titans main can no longer apply to towers, and with the recent change of Season 7, Loki's main build is now crit. making it where Loki has no flat pen to deal with damage on structures. Backdoor for Loki is essentially dead and can only push objectives with a minion wave. Even if Loki still split pushes, it is unfair to judge Loki entirely on this matter, since most other gods have their own frustration factor, such as Geb Shield, Nox CC combo, Achilles everything, King Arthur sustain, etc., etc. With Loki's frustration factor being really only split pushing, you cannot strongly agree for Loki's rework. Now everything I mentioned is Loki's frustration factor. Instead, let's talk about his usefulness and ability to function. Ever since his severe nerfs in 6.1, Loki's damage has become fairly unattractive, meaning that most assassins can deal with the same amount of burst damage as Loki in the late game. Loki's clear was also nerfed in patch 5.1, when Hi-Rez buffed minion health, and protections, but reduced their damage. Loki got a compensation buff with a 2-second cooldown and 15 base damage increase on his decoy. However, I have made a video about this buff to Loki is still a nerf in the end. Loki at level 7 with 4 points into the decoy could clear the archers before season 5. But now Loki needs all 5 points into decoy and at least 2 items to clear. Loki will be around level 10 to clear efficiently. So clearly Loki's clear and damage has been nerfed for the past 2 years, to the point that everyone places Loki in their subjective tier list as a D tier character. This calls for some massive change to Loki since he is in a tough spot. However, Hi-Rez stated that Loki shouldn't be in a spot under balance. In other words, to be mostly mediocre unless played by a Loki specialist. I agree with the statement that Loki should only be useful if picked up by a more efficient player, but Loki is in a spot where he's almost impossible to do well even by Loki specialists or Loki veterans. Loki is unable to jungle properly, which means he is stuck in the soul lane. The problem with that, however, is the soul lane has a poor impact on the early and mid game. Loki shouldn't get a rework, but instead a small adjustment that helps him play in the jungle and compete better against other dominating junglers. Loki takes around 3 seconds and more to clear camps, even in the late game. This is because in the late game, his decoy cannot clear until it explodes, and in the early and mid game, the decoy isn't powerful enough to clear it, which requires Loki to auto-attack the creeps, which will add more time. Most assassins, such as Raven, Susanoo, and Thor, can simply clear within a second. The new consumable Hog gave equality to all junglers, but only in the beginning. Loki would have to spend 100 gold every time to clear more efficiently. The adjustment for Loki will be mostly a buff. Loki's passive is fairly forgotten and undermined by a better version, Hunbat's passive. Loki deals 20% damage from behind, which works well with his decoy. However, 20% more damage off of low numbers is useless, especially since they nerfed his auto-progression chain. 20% more damage off of 75% or 50% auto-scaling is mostly irrelevant damage. So perhaps allow Loki to deal more damage from behind on creeps will allow Loki to clear more effectively in the jungle and switches him from a wave clearer to a jungle clearer. Jungle Loki will be less inclined to split push early in mid-game and focus more on ganks. There is another reason why Loki should not be getting a full or partial rework. In Smite's recent history, 3 gods were reworked simply for not being viable for an extended time. Freya is the first god who got a partial rework on her first and second ability, and this made her extremely effective and dominating. She was then nerfed until she was in a situation where no one would ever play her. Hi-Rez decided to revert her rework back to her standard abilities, a failed attempt. Very recently, Odin and Bastet were given partial reworks. The same pattern is being displayed. They have become extremely effective and dominating. If the pattern continues, they will continuously be nerfed until they're absolute again. For anyone who is reading this, ask yourself if you want Loki to be in this situation too. Ask yourself if you want Loki to become like Freya, Bastet, and Odin, where they become too strong to handle and then be rigorously nerfed until they are become ult bots or trash again. The bottom line is, Hi-Rez has proven that they are not capable of designing an old kit to further fit into the new generations of gods. With Loki's frustration factor by stealth and damage is counteracted with certain items and gods in the game, Loki's primary annoyance lies within split pushing. If split pushing is the primary issue of Loki, then it's safe to say he needs a role change. If what I say is true, then Loki should not be getting a rework, but instead a small adjustment to his passive that allows him to clear more effectively in the jungle to discourage the split pushing mentality and encourage team fight and play. This adjustment should be allowing him to deal more damage to creeps, but at the same time prevent him from clearing more effectively in the lane. Loki's passive should deal 50% more damage to jungle creeps when attacking from behind. This will help Loki's clear in the early game, but still make Loki the same in terms of god damage in the late game, since he can still only deal 20% to gods from behind. Many people have suggested ridiculous and unnecessary changes to Loki. This is because of people's failure to play Loki with proper experience. Some radical suggestions would be to allow Loki's decoy to explode on manual input similarly to Scylla's crush ability. I fail to see how this would add or help his clear, and will just add frustration factor to those who fight him. Range damage on Loki is not ideal. Another unfortunate idea is to add cleave auto attacks to Loki. I can see how this will definitely help his jungle clear, making him a more effective jungler, but at the same time it will make him a better wave clearer. We want to make Loki less of a laner and more of a jungler. Adding cleave auto attacks will help Loki too well in the general clearing department. It seems to me that people fail to realize the frustration factor when trying to interpret Loki's abilities. For example, people have suggested allowing Loki to swap positions with his decoy. The problem with this usage is that it adds to his already powerful mobility. Loki may choose to stealth for 4 seconds and move much faster than the average with a short cooldown. Loki may also teleport through walls at will. Adding more mobility to Loki will indeed add a trickster theme, but at the same time it will make Loki, an already hard god to deal with, harder. Again, to all those who care about Loki's future in Smite, it is better to be cautious and conservative than to liberalize Loki and make him the new Bastard or Odin, or worse, Freya. To conclude this already long argumentative session, the proper way of dealing with Loki is not to remove any of his current functions, but to adjust his limbo state of being in between a laner and a jungler. My change is not about making Loki fun or make him better. We cannot be radical about this. We have to start small and slowly work our way through the list. This is why I fundamentally disagree with Loki's rework. A rework should be the last resort until everything has been tried. I want Loki's identity to remain as a stealth assassin, but have Loki's role identity to be changed. Right now, Loki is seen as a soul laner. At the same time, Loki's major frustration factor is his split pushing. By adjusting Loki's role to the jungle, it will reduce that frustration. Also, the idea of a squishy god in the soul lane will finally be at rest. By allowing Loki's passive to deal more damage specifically to jungle minions only, it will allow Loki to clear much faster and enable him as a jungler. And so, Loki should not be getting any reworks, for that will upset a lot of professional Loki players who have played and mastered the arts of Loki for years. Okay, so essentially everything I've just said was written down and obviously scripted. For those who do not wish to, see the whole or listen to me being in a very monotone kind of voice, to sum up what I want for Loki is that I don't want to change Loki at all. A lot of people who play Loki do not want Loki to be changed whatsoever. People may have certain opinions on certain abilities, but overall they don't want Loki to be changed as a stealth assassin burst character. I want Loki to have a role identity. Because right now, he's being played in the ADC, jungle, and solo, and even mid sometimes. Obviously, people see Loki and they see him in the solo lane, but he doesn't work in the solo lane. The fact of the matter is that when you play Loki solo, you're hurting your team. So I want Loki's role identity to be completely changed. I want Loki from a solo laner to a jungler. And then we can work our balance ideas around the jungle rather than the solo lane. For Loki to jungle more efficiently, I propose an adjustment to Loki's passive. Everything is going to remain the same except that whenever Loki attacks a jungle creep, which includes buffs, furies, oracles, and that's it, Loki will deal 50% more damage. Now, I've done the math for this. Loki's base damage, I think, is 38 at level 1. 75% of that, because remember, he's scaling, is 75% the first auto attack. It will deal around 29 damage. Correct me if I'm wrong. 29 damage. This is off the top of my head. With Loki's passive, it goes from 28.9 to 32. So only 3-4 more damage. That's really low. With 50%, it's going to go from 32 to 44, 42. Which is additional 8 to 10 more damage. And that's without Assassin's Blessing. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is make Loki a jungler. And I believe that the first step we should make that will not irritate anyone, hopefully, is that allowing Loki to clear more effectively in the jungle will make him a jungler, therefore split push less. Because a jungler cannot split push in early and mid game. And in late game, you can't split push either because, you can split push, but without an assassin in the team, you're just hurting your team for the worse. So that's my idea. That's my proposal. I want Hi-Rez to not rework Loki. Reworking should be the last thing we should ever try, and instead we should worry about changing his role identity from a solo laner to a jungler, and then work our way from there. So thank you guys so much for stopping by. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please post it down below. And I'm going to see you guys all Loki and non-Loki players next time.